Not missing a day. Still no Eliana? Alyssa C? Gabe? Griffin? No Justin? Alyssa N? Lester? Tanner? And Alexandra V, right? Okay, well, we'll get started. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope all is well. Remember yesterday, your test number 2 should show up in Aries. So check and make sure that the score you thought you had is what is recorded. Those were transferred. They'll update again here in about 45 minutes at 9:30. So if you took it last night or late yesterday afternoon, it'll update then. As I told you yesterday, what we're going to take a look at is the specifics of our free enterprise system. So last unit, we took a look at the broad-based definitions of economic systems, right? Market systems where individuals make decisions. Command or centrally planned economic system in which the government makes all the decisions, or we have mixed economies where there's some government decisions made, some individual decisions made, and then they basically share that. But this week we'll look specifically at what we have, all right, in terms of how does the government get involved, the decisions they make, individuals and businesses, the decisions that they make, and that is what we will do. So we look at the free enterprise system. The three big things is be able to explain what free enterprise means and how it acts in our country. What are the benefits of free enterprise? What are the negative aspects of free enterprise? And then what is the difference between public and private sectors? And so we will talk about that in terms of why they're provided and what they are meant for. So if you can, go ahead and get to module 9. All right, so free enterprise system, and this is, as I said, this is specific to the United States, all right? This is specific to the United States and how we operate as a country. So all of this unit will be specific to the United States and will be unlike anything else across the world. So another country could have an economic system similar to ours, but our rules and regulations are much different. It's interesting, right? Everybody was talking about the big Oprah interview, right, with the former prince and his wife. In Great Britain, there are no copyright laws. So you can have a movie come out on a Friday, and that could be put all over the internet, all over social media in Great Britain as soon as it comes out, where in the United States, right, there would be a copyright claim on that, and you would not be allowed to disseminate that or use it in any way outside of what is allowed, specifically if you weren't paying for it. So it's a big difference there. But basically, free enterprise in our country is the freedom of private businesses to organize and operate for profit in a competitive system without much interference by the government beyond the regulation necessary to protect public interest and keep the national economy in balance. And that comes right from the Great Depression in the 1930s, and we'll go over that as well. So when you have characteristics of free enterprise in our system, what you're going to see is that there's going to be economic freedom, voluntary exchange, the right to have your private property protected, and basically I would say almost an overabundance of goods and services because of profit motive. So if we take a look at and examine each 4 of those, right, economic freedom, you have the economic freedom if you have money. Let's say that you have $10 in your wallet, and I use this all the time, right? Analogy all the time. But if you have $10 in your wallet, you can go and purchase anything that you want for breakfast, lunch, dinner with that $10. You have the option to go choose where you want. And that's the economic freedom that you have in a free enterprise system. Voluntary exchange means that if you have a good or service, you can sell that if you would like. Now, there are exceptions, right, beyond regulation necessary for what is the public interest. So, you know, you can't stand at the corner and sell crack cocaine because that is deemed not in the best public interest, unhealthy, illegal. But any other goods and services that are allowed, if you decide to, you can sell those things. Private property protection means that the government cannot come in and take your property without just cause or without proper compensation. So, you know, we're talking about selling crack cocaine, right? The profits from drug deals and things that you buy from those profits would not be legal private property. So if you're arrested and convicted on those charges, they could take your private property. But if you own a house, government can't just come and take it. You have private property rights that are protected constitutionally over a series of decades and over a series of court rulings. And then the last thing is this idea about profit motive. Profit motive meaning that businesses generally will make decisions based on what makes them the most money. And it's that profit motive that allows them to be very efficient in how they do things, to provide quality products at the lowest possible price, to make a profit because they're competing against other people. All right, competing against other people. Just a second here, I'll get you the second one. I don't know why my no, my screen's stuck. That's not going to do us much good, is it? There we go. All right, perfect. Now I can move to the other one. Sorry. Everybody's internet and stuff is slow today. All right, so how does this benefit you as an individual, as a consumer? This is what it's going to do for you. So the benefits of free enterprise in the United States has benefits to each individual, regardless of state, regardless of county, regardless of city, because there are things that are constitutionally protected. And so when you look at how the economy operates, it's partly on faith, right? When we have a dollar in our wallet, we understand that the government backs that currency up and says that that dollar is worth $1. And that dollar was worth $1 3 decades ago. That dollar is going to be worth $1 3 decades from now. We have faith in that because of the precedent that the government has set up in terms of guaranteeing that. Over the decades, there have been property rights that have been written in. And so if we look at property rights, and I can give you an example from here in this valley. So about 15, I guess it's been about 15 years now, when this school district was looking to build a third comprehensive high school, they were looking at various land. They were looking at land out by Tanglewood. They were looking at land on the very, very northwest side of town, and then that plot of land where Pioneer Valley is now on the northeast side of town. There was a family that owned that farmland, and they didn't want to sell. The district determined, in terms of the amount of growth that was going on at the time, that it would be best to have the school on the northeast side, that there wasn't going to be much growth on the southwest side. And so they went through a process that's called eminent domain. So even though that family owned the land, the school board, being a government agency, is able to go through a process called eminent domain and take the land for fair compensation. So it's a court process, and obviously there's a public need to educate children, right? And without a third high school, they wouldn't be able to publicly educate all of the children who had a constitutional right to a compulsory education. So they made an offer on the land. The family said, no, that's not enough. They didn't want to sell in the first place, but this is not fair compensation. The family ends up winning, and the school district ends up paying more for the land than they offered. And it's because you have constitutional property rights. You're seeing the same thing now with the area in and around the new SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. That land, and part of it was taken by eminent domain. They're talking about taking part of a housing neighborhood off the 605 in the LA area with eminent domain because they want to widen the freeway. And it's going to be a legal fight in terms of the government having to prove that it is in the best interest of the public, and then what the fair market value is. Second constitutional protection, right, comes with taxation. The IRS, the ability of the federal government and state governments to tax, is a constitutional protection. Now, in California, there have been amendments to the state constitution, which says now, right, if there's any new state tax that is proposed, it has to be approved by 2/3 of the people. If it does not get 2/3 of the vote, the tax will not pass and it will not become effective. Lastly, is this idea of the rights of a contract. When things are put into writing, you have the constitutional protection of that contract, and the courts will uphold a written contract unless there was fraud or some sort of deception in the processing of that contract and getting both parties to assign. So in our system, you have these protections. They're not the same all the way around the world. Different economic systems obviously have different needs, but in this country, your property rights are protected. Your right against unfair taxation without representation is protected. And if you enter into a written contract, that written contract has to be honored unless there was fraud or deception in providing, right, what was said in that contract. So, basic principles of free enterprise. We touched on this a little bit, but in our country, the biggest driving force in our economic system is this idea of profit motive, that I, as an entrepreneur or business person, can make as much money as possible without any limit on what I can do outside of regulations and things like that, what is legal, what is not legal, and I get to keep the profits, right? We have the idea of open opportunity. Everyone can compete in the marketplace and there may be different outcomes. So why are Apple and Samsung phones so popular now when Nokia back, I would say in 2003, 2004 was the biggest cell phone company in the world? It's this open opportunity. If you come up with a good idea, if you come up with a product that is better than others, you can take more of the market share for yourself. And then we have economic rights. You have the right to be treated equally with all others. You have the right to own private property. You have the right to freely enter into a contract. You have the right to voluntarily exchange your resources for things that you may want. And you have the right to equal competition with others who may seem that they have an advantage. Any questions on that? Let me see if I can get to the next page. All right, what I'm going to show you now is an example of what has happened, I would say, a few times in US history. It happened right before World War I. It has happened in the 60s and 70s. It's happened in the 80s. It happened in the 90s. There are numerous examples of that. But I want to show you about deregulation and what it does to prices. All right, so this is a video about airline deregulation that comes about in the late 70s, early 80s. And when I was a little kid, the federal government of the United States was the one that ran air traffic, air transportation. So the federal government told airlines where they could operate. They told what airlines could operate where. And the federal government told them, this is what you're going to charge for an airline ticket. This is how it was. In the town that I lived in, we used to go fly to Phoenix to see my mom's parents. And there was only one airline. And that airline was basically told, this is the amount of money that you're going to charge from point A to point B. And that's how it was throughout the United States. So this is going to talk about deregulation, what it means, and then I'm going to show you and illustrate for you what deregulation can mean in a positive sense for consumers.
On October 24th, 1970.
Okay, so first thing, let's see how well my faith in humanity is going to be illustrated here today. All right. Anybody, and you just speak up. Anybody know that gentleman sitting down right there? Anybody tell me who he is? Any guesses?
The president?
That's right. 39th President of the United States. Who is it? Was a peanut farmer from Georgia. Any guesses?
It's Jimmy Carter.
Very impressive. Trevor, you're the first one to get that right in about 4.5 years. Good for you. I'm impressed. My faith in humanity is
President Carter signed the
saved.
Airline Deregulation Act. For years, the airline industry had been rigidly regulated by the government. By 1978, the general public and many government officials had decided that this system was no longer effective and that it was time for the airlines to be free from government regulation. This one piece of legislation, for better or for worse, would turn the airline industry in a whole new direction by radically changing the business for both the consumer and those working within it. Without the act, the airline industry as we know today may not have come to be. The United States economy of the 1970s was one of great instability. An oil crisis in 1973, rapid inflation, and other poor economic conditions were some of the primary reasons for this. Citizens began blaming government and its regulations for some of these hardships. One industry heavily regulated by the government was the airlines. Since 1938, airlines had been subordinate to the rules established by the Civil Aeronautics Board, better known as the CAB, a government regulatory agency. The CAB set ticket prices, decided what routes what airlines could fly, and controlled what airlines could enter and exit the market. The rules of the CAB gave airlines minimal business freedom. Given the general public's antipathy towards regulations at the time, many people started disliking the CAB. The new idea that airlines should be allowed to make their own business choices was emerging.
all right. Last time I'll ask you this. Gentlemen in front of the microphones. Who is it? Anybody got an idea? This is really going deep. Look at his face. His brother was the 35th president of the United States. Other brother was attorney general. Any ideas? That's a Kennedy. That's Ted Kennedy.
This new idea was also making its way into Congress. Some congressmen, most notably Senator Ted Kennedy, started to make the case for deregulating the airlines. The airline industry itself did not exactly share the same opinion with the public.
I don't think there was any movement much within the industry to deregulate.
Some smaller airlines, such as Frontier, Piedmont, and Allegheny, embraced the idea of deregulation, seeing it as a way to grow. However, the primary airlines, such as TWA, American, and Eastern, were not so thrilled with the idea. These airlines actually benefited from some of the regulations and received special interest from the CAB. Given their size and prominence, the voice of the large airlines far outpowered that of the smaller ones. Despite a lack of airline support, interest for deregulating the airlines continued to grow in Washington. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter took office. Carter embraced the idea of deregulating the airlines and appointed Dr. Alfred Kahn as chairman of the CAB to speed up the process. Kahn, a well-known political economist and college professor, would become the last, yet most important, driving force of deregulation. Kahn spent his first 2 years as chairman diligently working towards his goal of creating a deregulated airline industry. First, he did everything in his power to relax regulations on the airlines. This was important because he used the successful results of that action to gain support from lawmakers. Kahn also worked with lawmakers to help formulate the deregulatory bill. His work paid off. When Senator Howard Cannon introduced the bill to Congress in April of 1978, it was met with minimal opposition from both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Later that year, on October 24, 1978, President Carter signed what would become the Airline Deregulation Act. Upon Carter's signing of the act, a new era for the airlines had begun. The Airline Deregulation Act called for a gradual diminishment of CAB powers. Congress set dates in which the CAB regulations would cease to exist. In 1985, the CAB closed altogether. At that point, only safety was to be regulated by the government. Airlines were, for the first time in decades, essentially on their own. In the beginning, the effects of the Airline Deregulation Act seemed to be in line with many of the desired outcomes. One of the aspects most emphasized in the Act was the opportunity for new airlines and new competition. Competition was something the CAB had not encouraged. To protect airlines from competition, the CAB had rarely allowed for new airlines to open and new flights to be added. Now, without these limiting regulations, new airlines and new routes were seemingly appearing overnight. Competition was on the rise, ticket prices were going down, and passengers had more choices than ever. For the airlines, the business was being redefined. What for years had been a luxury industry based on services was transforming into a transportation commodity. The new, innovative deregulation carriers such as People Express and New York Air were giving the traditionally dominant airlines a run for their money. Many airlines assumed that the new, rapid expansion was to continue perpetually, and for some, that had a deadly outcome.
Braniff was the next example of someone who got killed by deregulation.
Anticipating ongoing massive industry growth, Braniff International Airlines of Texas bought an abundance of new aircraft and added dozens of new routes. Unfortunately, they had created too much supply for too little demand. In 1983, Braniff, who had once been a highly successful airline, was forced to liquidate and sell many of their assets to People Express, who ironically, the same thing happened to several years later. Braniff would not be the only casualty of deregulation. Other dominant airlines also began to experience major losses in result to the changing business. Many service-oriented airlines such as TWA, Eastern, and Pan Am found it impossible to compete with the newer, more cost-oriented airlines. Consequently, most of these legacy carriers went into bankruptcy and many even liquidated. Now, many of the airlines that were once classified as primary by the CAB are no longer in existence. Although a good number of carriers were not able to adjust to the significant changes in the business, some did come out strong. Southwest Airlines, a low-fare airline that was limited to flying within Texas during the regulated years, used the sudden freedom from regulations to expand their horizons across the United States. Southwest's unique yet very effective business model allowed them to become one of the most consistently profitable entities in the industry by the end of the 1980s. Today, Southwest is known as the model low-fare carrier and is one of the most significant airlines in the industry. Even a good number of legacy carriers found ways to adjust their operations to cope with the changing market. One of the first steps many legacy carriers took was reconfiguring their route networks. American Airlines was the first to discover that operating a centralized hub-and-spoke network leads to the most effective operations. In a hub-and-spoke network, operations are focused around one or several hub cities. Airlines have passengers connect with these hubs on the way to their destination, rather than flying point-to-point flights to that destination. Changing to this type of operations allowed for airlines to use their equipment more efficiently and to fill more flights. Not every airline has adopted the hub-and-spoke system, but for many modern airlines, it has become the backbone of their operations. Legacy airlines also became great at cost-cutting over the years following deregulation. Amenities such as in-flight meals and ample legroom that the airlines were well known for prior to deregulation were becoming items of the past. More recently, airlines have saved money by reducing capacity and engaging in mergers with other airlines. Some even argue that airlines are cutting corners in safety to reduce costs. Supporters of that claim use fatal accidents such as ValueJet Flight 592 and Alaska Air Flight 261 as evidence. In both those accidents, procedures have been done incorrectly in order to save time and money, and with a deadly outcome. However, the reduction of safety is not universally accepted. Statistics show that flying today is safer than ever. In fact, there hasn't been a fatal accident in the United States since Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed near Buffalo 4 years ago. Although the encouragement of competition was one of the primary tenets of the Deregulation Act, the progression of the airline business has ultimately led to much less than anticipated. Legacy carriers were never in favor of this new competition and used a variety of strategies to eliminate it. One common strategy was to drive low-fare carriers out of their hubs. The best-known example of this was the controversy between legacy carrier Northwest Airlines and low-fare startup Reno Air in 1993. When Reno Air began flying the Northwest Minneapolis hub, Northwest temporarily lowered their ticket prices on routes competing with Reno Air. The promising Reno Air was soon forced to leave the Minneapolis market because they could not compete with Northwest temporarily low prices. Once Reno Air left, Northwest ticket prices went back to the normal high. The natural evolution of the airline industry has also led to less competition. With airlines creating code-share agreements and merging with each other, competition has been naturally reduced. Finally, events such as the September 11th attacks and the rise of oil prices over the last several years has led to a massive reduction of capacity, ultimately leading to less competition. It has been almost 35 years since the airline industry was deregulated. Over the years, the topic of deregulation's legacy has been an issue of great debate. Many people, including Dr. Alfred Kahn, believe that airline deregulation has been a success. However, many others believe it's been a failure. Even though there's a tremendous ambiguity of feelings towards deregulation, there is one aspect of it that virtually all agree on. It has transformed the airline industry. Deregulation took away the government control airlines for years have been subordinate to. Without regulations, airlines made new choices and took a new path towards their future. The many and ongoing effects of the Airline Deregulation Act are what shaped and continue to shape air travel as we know it today and air travel as it applies towards the future.
Okay, so a couple of things, really three big things for you. And this is just how deregulation goes. Let me get back to the change that they made here. Let's see if I can bring that up. Probably went too fast. So one, deregulation, right, allows companies to decide where they're going to fly, how much they're going to charge, and now they get to basically fail or succeed
rather than flying
on their own.
Passengers connect.
Okay, so first thing up on the top is basically how things used to be. So this was during regulation. And so what you have, let's just say, for example, well, let me come up with a better color. Let's say, for example, this is LA. Up here, maybe San Francisco. Let's go say this is Phoenix. Let's say this is Dallas, Fort Worth. Maybe this is Denver. Not a very good D, is it? Miami. Let's say up here is Chicago. Let's say New York is up here. Before deregulation, airlines would basically take a plane, fly to Phoenix, drop off passengers, pick some up, fly to Chicago, drop off some passengers, pick them up, and then maybe carry on to New York, right? And then have a new crew come on and do the process again. New York to Chicago, Chicago back to Phoenix, Phoenix to LA, and then do the whole thing the next day. Well, what companies figured out was we are using one plane, right, to transfer all of these people, right, to 4 different areas, from LA to Phoenix, Phoenix to Chicago, Chicago to New York. And what airlines figured out, because they were free to do so now, was we can create a hub. And this has been done, right? So if you go to, get my eraser here. If you go to Denver's airport, really on the outside of the center of the city, it's quite a ways out, probably 20 minutes from Denver. What you have is a United hub, United Airlines. And what they figured out is we can use smaller planes. Say this is Dallas, Fort Worth. This is Chicago. This is San Francisco. We can use smaller planes that take less air fuel and basically fly those smaller planes back and forth between the hubs. So now, right, what they do is they fly you into one central location, and then from there, right, have you switch planes, get on another smaller plane, and go to your distance. So you basically, as you can see here from the arrows, have the ability to double up. You have the ability to double up, sometimes even triple up, between popular sites. So you can have one small plane going back and forth between San Francisco and Denver, LA and Denver, Phoenix and Denver, Dallas, Fort Worth and Denver, Chicago and Denver, and then turn that plane around and go back to the originating airport, right? But then use a smaller plane to make the haul back to a different spot. Now, you do have some airlines that do fly direct, right, from LA to New York, LA to Chicago, things like that. But those are medium-sized or larger-sized airplanes and generally cost a little bit more, right? That's why when you look on a particular site, you can see that direct flights generally cost a little bit more because it's a bigger plane using more fuel. Smaller planes that'll make multiple stops will cost you cheaper, but then you'll have some layovers in particular spots. And so it's interesting to see, right, in terms of what deregulation has done in terms of the price. And here is what it has done. So in real dollars, right, basically 1979 airline deregulation through 2011, in real dollars, you can see here, right, what the price, real cost per mile has done with deregulation. So in 1979, right before deregulation, was about 33 cents a mile to fly. And you can see that it has consistently gone down. Now you've had spikes, right? So you've had a spike here, you've had spikes here, you had a little spike here, and you see it start to go up a little bit here. These are all times when the price of crude oil per barrel coming from the Middle East, which is refined into air fuel, went up. And so those costs obviously were passed on. Now you can see a dip here, a big dip starting in 2001 through 2004, right? So if you looked at that, you understand obviously that the terror attacks in 2001, September of 2001, roughly right there. Air travel came back in about the middle of 2004 right there. So the price per mile went down so much because everybody was afraid to fly. So we did my wife and I did a trip with some friends to Greece, went to Turkey on that trip. And that was April of 2004. And they wouldn't believe that we were American. They go, we haven't seen Americans in 3 years. They thought we were Canadian. So you can see deregulation here in terms of what it's done has lowered costs. All right, questions there? Okay, so what you're going to do is I want you to, and let me bring this up. So I want you to research a plane ticket anywhere in the United States except for, like Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, something like that. So one of the 50 states. You can go to Priceline, you can go to Google Flights, you can go to anything you want, but I want you to research a round trip ticket anywhere that you want to go, except make sure that the trip is more than 21 days out, right? So you know how airline tickets work. 21 days are out, you pay the lowest price. If you get 14 to 20 days, price goes up significantly. 7 to 14 days, even more significantly, and then you'll pay the most for an airline ticket within 7 days of your flight. So I want you to pick a day that's 21 days out. So today is the 9th, so 1 week is the 15th, 2 weeks would be the 22nd, 3 weeks would be the 29th. So anything after the 29th. So I'm going to fly out from, let's say, Tuesday the 30th, and I'll come back Monday the 5th. All right, I'm going to do a round trip ticket, and I'll do LAX, and let's say I'll go to Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so for tomorrow, what I want you to do is to find a flight to somewhere you go, anywhere you want to go. I'm going to pick one that allows me baggage. So 12:50, oh, I don't know about that 12:59 a.m. Got no time. I got no time for that. I'll take a day flight. Here we go. So you can see here. So I'm going to go the day flight Delta 135, getting in a decent hour. 6:16 to 8. Where do I want to get? 5:15. I'd rather get an 8:24 because LA traffic would be horrible. So what I want you to do is to research a round trip ticket anywhere in the United States, 50 states. Make sure that it's more than 21 days out. I found a ticket from LAX to Minneapolis for $260. So I want you to write down the dates of your flight, where you're going to, where you were coming from, and then the total price of the flight. So I want you to have that ready with you tomorrow. We'll have you put that in, but I want to illustrate for you what airline deregulation has done over the last 30 to 40 years for the price of airline tickets. Has it really helped the consumer or has it helped the businesses? And we will go over that. Also tomorrow, we'll talk about a negative effect of deregulation, right? We've seen that in Texas with the power sort of situation after the freeze. And then also tomorrow, we will take a look at the differences between private sector and public sector in our economic system and what that means for you in terms of how things are protected, how they're offered, and what effect that has on you. So research any airline ticket that you want in any of the 50 states. Just make sure it's more than 21 days out. Right, where you're leaving from, where you're going to, the dates, and the price of the ticket. And we'll illustrate that for you at the beginning of the class. We'll illustrate a negative example of deregulation of what it could mean for you as a consumer. And then we'll talk about business cycles and the difference between public and private goods tomorrow. And that will finish the unit up for us. All right. So you should have enough time to finish that before your next period. Make sure you have that written down because you're going to submit that for points tomorrow. I'll have a portal that you can submit that information that you looked up. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.